All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Nicholas Herman, and I'm the Lawrence J. Schoenberg Curator at the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies at the University of Pennsylvania Libraries. And I'm joined today by my colleagues, Lynn Ransom, who is Sims Curator of Programs, and Dot Porter, who's Sims Curator uh, of Digital Humanities. And it's a pleasure to be here to introduce our speaker, Dr. Peera Panarut, postdoctoral researcher at the Center for the Study of Manuscript Cultures at the University of Hamburg. Before I introduce Dr. Panarut more fully, I'd like to welcome those of you who are joining us who might not be familiar with our online lecture series. This is the last online lecture of the fall semester at Sims, and we'll be starting up again next year in February. If you'd like to be kept abreast of all of our activities at the Schoenberg Institute, please go to schoenberginstitute.org, our website, and sign up for our monthly newsletter to receive all of our news. You'll hear, or you can learn that way about events like Coffee with a Codex, which is hosted every week by Dot Porter, as well as events like our symposium, our annual symposium, which we just held 2 weeks ago, and we'll be announcing the theme for next year's symposium very soon. So stay tuned for that. We'd also like to let you know that our journal, the journal that the Institute publishes twice a year, Manuscript Studies, is entering its 10th year, and issue 9.2, the fall 2024 issue, has just been released, and it is in open access on Project Muse. The link there in the chat. Please take a look. Brand new content for Manuscript Studies. With that said, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Peera Panarut, who, as I mentioned before, is currently a postdoctoral researcher in Hamburg at the Center for the Study of Manuscript Cultures. But as of January 2025, we'll be moving to the Asian Art Museum in Berlin, the Museum für Asiatische Kunst, where he will be doing postdoctoral research on Thai manuscripts. Dr. Panarut received his PhD in Thai Lao Studies from the Graduate School of Manuscript Cultures at the University of Hamburg in 2019, with a dissertation concerning manuscripts and the transmission history of classical Thai literature. And for this dissertation, he received the Carl H. Dietze Prize for Outstanding Doctoral Dissertation submitted at the University of Hamburg in the field of Asian and African Studies. At the Center for the Study of Manuscript Cultures, he's the project lead for the Cluster of Excellence project called Royal Scribes and Written Artifacts, Writing Culture of the Thai Court through the Archives of Royal Scribes. And he's also been a research associate for the project Traditional Knowledge in Cultural and Material Transformation, Inscriptions of Wat Pho Monastery and Thai Manuscript Culture. His research more broadly focuses on Thai manuscripts and their paleography and epigraphy, on classical Thai poetry, as well as archival and book history in Thailand. Among his many awards and fellowships, Dr. Panarut was visiting research fellow at the Schoenberg Institute. We were very happy to have him in Philadelphia back in February. And today he'll be sharing some of the research results of the month he spent with us at Sims, with a talk entitled Peculiar Paracontents from Thai Chanting Books, a case study of manuscripts from Philadelphia. Peera.
Yeah, thank you very much. Now, I'd like to share my screen first. So I hope everyone can see my slide now. Okay, thank you. So thank you very much again, Nicholas, for the nice introduction. And good afternoon for those who are attending from Philadelphia, and good evening from Hamburg. So today I would like to talk about colophons of Thai chanting manuscript in the presentation entitled Peculiar Paracontents from Thai Chanting Books, a case study of manuscripts from Philadelphia. And this is a part of the result of my research fellowship at the Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies, University of Pennsylvania, during last February, as Nicholas just mentioned. So to begin with, I would like to explain a little bit about Thai chanting books, which form a genre of Thai Buddhist manuscripts used for chanting in monastic and domestic rituals. The chanting books appear in a large size, namely 13 wide and around 60 to 66 centimeter long. So it's larger than regular manuscripts for literary texts in general. So please take a look at the image here. This is the manuscript from Penn Museum. It's provided as example for chanting book here. No? In this case, the manuscript is around 63 centimeter long and 13 centimeter wide. So this specific type of leporello or folded manuscript is known in Thai as Samut Pramalai, literally Pramalai manuscript. So the term I will talk more about further in the presentation. The manuscript has to be this large, as it is supposedly used simultaneously by multiple chanters in actual rituals. And this kind of chanting books often contain colorful illustrations on some pages. So not on every pages, but you see some impressive illustrations from some pages of them. And this kind of manuscript is technically a collection of chanting texts in Pali and Thai. So Pali is a classical language for Theravada Buddhism. But this kind of manuscript is not only the chanting text simply collected together. Rather, these manuscripts are supposed to be used for actual chanting in the rituals. Okay, and some manuscripts even show the scene in which the multiple monks look at the same large manuscript and chant. You can see that the manuscript has to be large enough for all the monks to see. It is believed that some monks must have memorized the chanting text by heart, while manuscripts were there just to represent teachers of the past and the sacred words written in it, performing ritual function of the manuscript. But some paracontents or paratexts found in manuscripts suggest that the written text in the manuscript are supposed to be read actually by the chanters, as we will see further in the presentation today. And with their colorful paintings, a number of Thai chanting books attracted Westerners' eyes, from diplomats and travelers to antique dealers, and therefore found their ways to different institutions in Europe and America, thus featuring many Western collections of Thai manuscripts since the late 19th century. And the production of these chanting manuscripts was perceived as an act of merit, as it prolongs the existence of sacred text and at the same time the existence of Buddhist rituals, and therefore prolongs Buddhism itself. Therefore, these manuscripts often, though not always, contain colophons of sponsors, scribes, and owners of the manuscripts making wishes and expressing faiths in Buddhism. Some of them can be very extensive, spanning over several folded pages of manuscripts. And there are more than 50 Thai manuscripts kept in Philadelphia, right? Namely at the Penn Museum and at the Gislak Center for Special Collections, Rare Books and Manuscripts under the Penn Libraries. Among them, there are 8 manuscripts which fall into the category of Thai chanting books, as listed here. Furthermore, there are also 7 additional fragments of chanting books at the Penn Museum, but they've survived only as fragments, so they are excluded from this study and my presentation today. Today, I will talk about these 8 Thai chanting books in Philadelphia, but only one of them will be the focus of the presentation, namely the manuscript called Pen Museum 8913-251. It is an undated manuscript, possibly dated around late 19th century or early 20th century, due to the paleography and the artistic style. It preserved the text of Pramalai Glonsawat, or a Thai chanting text, and Abhidhamma Jet Kampi, which is a Pali chanting text. This manuscript, so Pen Museum 8913-251, is famous for its peculiar paracontents, or in this case, a scribal note asking the chanters or readers to drink tea, as you can see from the image here. So in the tradition of Thai chanting books, we can find various Pali texts collected together with one specific Thai text called Pramalai Glonsawat, right? This explains why this type of manuscript is generally called in Thai Samut Pramalai or Pramalai manuscript. For the case of Pali text, there are extracts from the Pali canon called Abhidhamma Jet Kampi, literally 7 books of Abhidhamma, used for chanting in Buddhist funerals. Furthermore, we also find a group of sutta from Sutanta Pitaka of the Pali canon used in the healing ritual called in Thai Suat Khai. On the other hand, Pramalai Glonsawat is a Thai poem chanted also in Buddhist funerals. Therefore, we found many manuscripts that collect Pramalai together with Abhidhamma Jet Kampi, as both are used in Buddhist funerals. The very same Abhidhamma Jet Kampi text, so Pali text, is even chanted in funerals today, though the use of chanting manuscripts or chanting books is already absent. So the original composition of Pramalai Glonsawat is undated. Its authorship remains anonymous, just like many other cases of classical Thai poetry. The earliest of all the extant manuscripts is dated in mid-18th century. Therefore, the text should be written sometime before that. Since the 18th century, more than 100 Pramalai manuscripts are found. The text is one of the most popular Thai literary texts among the folks, so not really popular in the royal court. The poem of Pramalai Glonsawat tells a story of a monk called Pramalai, who possesses supernatural power, visited hells and heavens, as well as meeting with the future Buddha, Arya Maitreya, in the Tavatimsa heaven. Then Pramalai returns to the human world and spread the prophecy of the future Buddha about the 5,000 years of Buddhism and the arrival of the future Buddha in the human world. The illustrations from Pramalai manuscript sometimes depict the story, and here is the scene in which Pramalai has a conversation with God Indra in Tavatimsa heaven before he meets with the future Buddha. But in many cases, the illustrations do not concern with the contents of the text at all, so it's just decoration. But in this case, it depicts the scene from the text. Okay. And in the past, there are a group of scholarly works concerning Pramalai text. Some focuses on the poem and its tradition, others on illustrations in terms of art history. We found scholarly works in Thai, in English, and also other languages too, which concern this Pramalai tradition. And several years ago, I myself did research on colophons of Pramalai manuscript. The research article written in Thai entitled, so I translate the title into English, Colophons of Faith, Paratext, and Book History of Pramalai Glonsawat manuscripts. This has been published in the volume Book History and Literary Studies in the Thai Context early in this year to 2024. So this pink volume here. And this research project is funded by the National Research Council of Thailand. In this article of mine, I investigated the colophons found from manuscripts of Pramalai Glonsawat preserved in Thailand and Europe, in order to trace aspects on book history of Pramalai chanting books, and in total, there are 116 manuscripts of Pramalai Glonsuwat collected for this study. As I would like to focus on Thai poetry, I did not include Pali chanting books without Pramalai text in this study. The Abhidham Jet Kampi books, which do not preserve Pramalai with Thai poetry, might have been more than 100 copies survive. The corpus still awaits further investigations, of course. And this research for the book history project is conducted during 2021 and 22, covering the corpus from the National Library of Thailand in Bangkok and other institutions in Europe. For example, State Library of Berlin, Bavarian State Library in Munich, the British Library, and the Royal Danish Library in Copenhagen. And colophons, which I collected for my study, are found from 67 manuscripts from 116. So more than a half of the manuscript from the corpus contain colophons. And at that time, manuscripts from the US are excluded in my previous research because the research was conducted before my visits in the United States of America. And early in 2024, so February and March, during my visiting research fellowship at the SIMS, Schoenberg Institute for Manuscript Studies in Philadelphia, and also during my short visits in New York City and Princeton, more Pramalai manuscripts are found. This is not beyond any expectations for sure, because Pramalai always feature the Western collections of Thai manuscripts. So we have now 8 copies of Pramalai manuscript in Philadelphia, 16 more in the New York Public Library, and at least 3 manuscripts from Princeton University Library, but Princeton must have had more, but I didn't have time to survey all of them. Okay, and so this presentation can be considered an extension of my previous research on colophons of Pramalai manuscripts. However, there must be a large number of Pramalai manuscripts in the US. There are still famous institutions along the West Coast and other institutions across the country, which await further investigation. However, this presentation will point out some dynamic paracontents which can be found from the Thai chanting books from Philadelphia. And before going further, I would like to briefly clarify the term paratext and paracontents here. So the concept of paratext has been proposed by Gerard Chenet, a French scholar, in 1987, in his study on modern printed books. The term paratext refers to liminal elements surrounding the main text, namely title pages, prefaces, afterwords, illustrations, interview, and etc. These paratextual elements can be attributed to the author themselves, or to the editors, or to the scribes, and to literary critics. All of these paratexts have cultural and interpretative functions. Okay, and then the concept of paratext was later adapted to study pre-modern manuscripts around the globe, covering colophons, scribal notes, interlinear and marginal notes, and so on. However, the term paratext suggests its emphasis on written elements, right? So we have main text and we have paratext. So the term text is still inherited in them. Therefore, since 2018, the Center for the Study of Manuscript Culture at the University of Hamburg proposed the term paracontents in order to emphasize on and include non-written or non-textual elements of the written artifacts, covering illustrations, seals, symbols, or graphic elements, as well as decorations. All of them are surrounding the main contents of manuscripts, okay? The term Paracontents I used in the title of my presentation today refers mainly to colophons and also to scribal notes as well as other markers, which will be later discussed. But first, I will begin with colophons. So colophon here means finishing touch of the scribes, okay? In Thai manuscripts, colophons can be placed at the ends of the manuscripts, so when the text ends, as well as at the beginning of the manuscript before the text begins. So sometimes colophon at the beginning are called prefaces. And though placed at the beginning, it is often written after the main text or the main content was finished, as the colophon often records the date of the completion for copying. Like it is often written that the copy or the manuscript was finished on this day, that year, and so. Furthermore, in the case of manuscripts collecting more than one text, or the so-called multiple text manuscript, colophon can be placed at the end of one text before the following text begin, thus appearing in the middle of manuscript. Therefore, colophon is not necessarily placed only at the beginning or at the end of the manuscript. And colophons in the case of Plummer manuscripts can be properly taken as a space for scribes, sponsors, as well as readers and users of manuscripts to express their wishes and sometimes their personal feelings. So interesting aspects on book history and history of reading can also be investigated from these colophons. And as mentioned earlier, more than a half of extant Plummer manuscripts contains colophons, while the other literary texts, colophon can be found only from 1/4 of the extant manuscripts. So due to my previous research and the statistics. The colophons appear in both Thai scripts and Khom scripts. The so-called Khom script here is a variation of old Khmer script used and developed in Thailand since the 13th century. Therefore, the script resembles the Khmer script used in Cambodia. And Khom script was used not to write Khmer or Cambodian language, but to write Pali and also Thai religious texts, such as Purmalai. Therefore, Khom script is always perceived as the sacred script of Chao Phraya River Basin in central Thailand. And please note that Purmalai Glon Suvat is regularly written with the Khom script. So in many cases, colophons and scribal notes in Thai language are written in these manuscripts with Khom script too. In most cases, colophons or Purmalai manuscript are written in prose, but verses or poetry are not uncommon. The regular or common contents of colophons, which we can find most, encompasses the dates of production, names of sponsors and scribes, sponsors' wishes, and expression of faith and feelings, giving the merits to the deceased, and so on. Most often, it ends with the Pali formula, Nibbana Pacayo Hotu, or may this act of manuscript production be the cause to reach Nibbana. You can see an example of a common colophon from this manuscript preserved at the National Library of Thailand. Here it reads. So here, no? The text is completed here. May I reach Nibbana. Nibbana Pacayo Hoti. And actually it should be Hotu, but this is a variation of Pali verse. And then it gives the date, equivalent to 1762. The other example here comes from the Royal Danish Library. It reads, the production of this Purmalai manuscript is sponsored by Bang, the father, and Im, the mother, along with their daughters for the religion. It gives the year, not the date, of manuscript production, in this case equivalent to 1935. And this one is actually the earliest dated manuscript of Purmalai Glon Suvat that we have. So around mid-18th century. namely 1762. And here, so on the bottom here, is the latest dated manuscript that I have found. So dated in 1935. This one is from the early 20th century. However, I believe some extant manuscript might have been produced after 1935, but when there is no exact date given, this one is evidently the latest dated manuscript so far. Sometimes colophons appear in the form of poetry. So really sometimes, only 4 cases out of 67 from my previous research were written in different poetic meters, namely glon, clone, and gab, and so on. These colophon poems, composed by the scribe or sponsor, not the author of the main text, express faith and wishes while showcasing poetic skills of the scribes or sponsors. This is an example of a very extensive colophon poem consisting of 36 stanzas of glon meter. Its content states the wishes that the sponsor made for his next life as a result of producing this Plummerline manuscript. And this manuscript is from the State Library of Berlin. In many cases, we can also hear the voices of individuals, men and women, making their personal wishes from the colophon. The example here comes from the State and University Library of Hamburg, dated 1874. The sponsors are one family, husband, wife, and their child, most possibly daughter due to the name, wishing to be reborn as a family in the next lives. As it reads, we Luang Si Tip Pak Di, so the husband and wife Mae Hom, and our child should have donated this Pramalai manuscript for the religion. When we die in the future, may we meet again in the next lives and always be a family. May we gain enlightenment in the future. And within the same manuscript, on the page that follows, there is a separate wish made by the wife, or Mae Hom, that I, Mae Hom, the wife of Luang Si Tip Pak Di, express the wish to be the wife of Luang Si Tip Pak Di in the next lives. May he be my husband alone. This is also indicates the women's voice in the polygynous society of 19th century Thailand, in which one male tended to have multiple wives at a time. And regarding that, women's voices from traditional periods were very hard to find from any other male-dominated sources. Colophon does preserve the personal wish and voice of women individual, though in many cases only briefly. Furthermore, as producing or sponsoring chanting books was considered a meritorious act of religious donation, colophons of some chanting books also records the amount of expenses in the manuscript production, revealing economic aspects of traditional books, which have rarely survived in other sources as well. When comparing it with the information from other historical evidence, the production of one Pramalai manuscript required a relatively large amount of money. And the expense rose when time passed, becoming more and more expensive for the case of the early 20th century manuscripts, while the cost for printing books got cheaper and cheaper every year. And this is an early example for the colophon with information on expenses, dated 1832, now kept at the Bavarian State Library of Munich. And here is the translation of the part mentioning the expenses of manuscript production. Here we know that one blank manuscript in such a large size, 13 centimeter wide and 66 or 65.5 centimeter long, costed money of 1 tamlung or 4 baht, while wages for hiring 5 scribes to copy this manuscript costed in total 6 baht, 2 สลึง and 1 เฟื้อง. So approximately 1 baht and 1 สลึง per 1 scribe. So you see that the cost for a blank manuscript is more expensive than the cost for hiring 1 scribe here. And in 1832, the Royal Chronicle of Bangkok mentions an economic crisis following the wars during that year, in which 1 bucket of rice, so a fine rice, expensively costed 1 baht. But here you see 1 blank manuscript of a large size cost 1 tamlung or 4 baht. So economic aspects from colophons reveal another interesting part of Thai book history and should be properly taken as a research topic of its own right. So today I will not go into any further details about the economy of chanting books, but we'll talk more about the Paracontents concerning chanting practices. So colophons are also space for scribes to communicate with readers and users of manuscripts, as I mentioned earlier, right? And interestingly, colophons for Pramalai manuscripts often address users of manuscripts as chanters, or in Thai, ผู้สวด or นักสวด. So chanters, which in this case can be laymen or monks, must have been the main users of these manuscripts, these chanting books. Okay? For example, in 1 manuscript from the National Library of Thailand here, it is written when the text ends that จบแล้วนะท่านผู้สวดเอ่ย or the text has already ended, my dear chanters. Another manuscript also from the National Library of Thailand contains a colophon that reads, Pramalai completely ends here, dear chanters. So ท่านนักสวดเอ่ย. Or here, sometimes it can even tell the chanters to take a break. For example, here, หยุดพักเสียหน่อย หายเหนื่อยแล้วสวดต่อไป sorry. Or please take a short break. If feeling less tired, then continue chanting further. And this one is from the Leiden University Library in the Netherlands. Or this one, I invite you to continue uttering Pramalai text further. Dear chanters, please chant it well. So this one from State Library of Berlin. Sometimes the colophon addresses chanters in an unexpected tone, as appearing in this one from the National Library of Thailand, that this is the recto side of these Pramalai manuscripts. Dear chanters, do not laying down when chanting, because it is sinful. So อย่านอนสวดบาปนักแลท่าน. Or this one from Dublin. Please turn to the verso side of the manuscript. Chant it beautifully. สวดให้เพราะสนอใจ, for example. And in many cases, colophons record personal feelings of the scribes. Often the scribes ask reader and users not to criticize their handwritings and errors that unintentionally occur during the process of hand copying. Actually, this is a nature of the practice of hand copying, that errors occur, right? But humility or modesty is expressed as a part of the colophon tradition. It appears widely in almost all kinds of texts, not limited itself to the chanting books only, as you can see here. So this one is from 1 Pramalai manuscript. So it reads, if there is any errors, please forgive me. Please do not reprimand or criticize. If any errors detected, please make merits by correcting them. So this is a Buddhist manuscript, right? So writing it, copying it is perceived as an act of merit, as well as the act of correcting them. You gain the merits by correcting them too. Furthermore, sometimes the scribes made complaints of their back pain, caused by the long period of time sitting and copying the text into the manuscript by hand. This example is from another manuscript from the National Library of Thailand. So ข้าพเจ้าเขียนไว้เจ็บหลังสุดใจ so I wrote this manuscript. My back hurts very much. And more interesting is this example that reads, in case of any errors, may scholars correct them. Please do not criticize me, my dear. It hurts at my back so much. But because of my unfailing faith, I therefore give my handwriting to the religion by making copy of these manuscripts. So the Thai text reads, เจ้าพระคุณเอ่ยเจ็บหลังเต็มประดา เหตุว่าศรัทธาจริงจังจึงฝากฝังลายมือในพระศาสนา So we can imagine that the gesture of writing such a long text into such a large manuscript with the neat handwriting, the neat one, not the scribbled one, could be a tedious task that caused back pain for sure. And this colophon also states that despite the back pain, he did copy the manuscript simply out of faith, making it as his religious donation. So with the wide range of contents for colophons, some of them can be considered peculiar when judging from our modern perspectives, of course. Sorry. For instance, the colophon from this manuscript preserved at the British Library in London states that the scribe cut himself to give his blood for mixing with ink as a part of donation. As the colophon here reads, I have faith in the religion and therefore cut my own forehead with knife, taking my blood to mix with ink to write the words of Prasi Ariyametrai, the future Buddha, which were given to Pramalai to remind people on earth on committing good deeds. I think of myself and thus give my blood to inscribe the words of the Lord. May I be able to ordain within the school of Prasi Ariyametrai in the future. So what the scribe wrote here sounds very striking. The trace of his blood must have been a part of the ink you can see from this image. But there is no scientific investigation on the ink written in this very manuscript ever done so far. Furthermore, colophons and other paracontents can sometimes become a playful space of readers and users of manuscripts, as in the case of Codex Siam 31 from the Bavarian State Library in Munich. The text of this manuscript was written by the first scribe and then left incomplete. Then the second scribe took over and continued copying the rest till the end and left his colophon on the last page. And here you can see the first part was written in one neat hand, while the latter part being added by the other hand of the second scribe, and with different style of paintings too. If you compare here with here. And the second scribe has added his colophon at the end here, as shown here. So the first line of colophon reads, ฉันเขียนไม่เป็นอย่าได้ติเตียนเลยนะท่านเอ่ย So I am not good at writing. Please do not criticize me. And then the text in the second line is encoded here with the code called อักษรเลข or numeral writing, which uses numerals to represent vowel diacritics, possibly playing with readers' intellects. The decoded text here reads, ข้าพเจ้าผู้ซ่อมแซมขอให้เป็นนิสัยปัจจัยกับพระศาสนาเถิด or my translation here reads, I, the one who fixed the text, which the deeds to be the cause for the merits of the religion. The contents of this colophon can be considered regular, even though it's encoded here. They are rather regular, if not for the following writing at the end of the first line, written in the same hand possibly by the same second scribe. Here, so these parts here, it reads, if anyone gossips against me, may a horse fuck his or her mother. Forgive me, but if you read the Thai original text here, you see how vulgar the colophon in original language sound, okay? And under it, so from here is the first swear word, right? And under it, there is an addition of writing in black pencil, different hand in unskillful writing style, perhaps by reader or user of the manuscript or the trainee for chanting. It's written here, ใครไม่นิน so ให้พ่อมา so who does not gossip, may his or her father fuck the horse. Obviously, it plays with the curse on the first line. So from here to here. Possibly some students or chanting trainee wanted to write something playfully as a reaction to the curse. And from this page, you see the use of encoded writing here, which can be decoded to be a very regular colophon, not conveying any secret at all. And the swear word after swear word appear together in this manuscript. The cases are not that common in chanting books, because one would not expect the writing of swear words in a Buddhist chanting book, right? Yet colophons offer a dynamic space for such writing. And now you already saw how colophons from Pamalai chanting books look like. There are common contents in which wishes and faiths are expressed, while the uncommon ones can also be attested. Let us now turn to the chanting books from Philadelphia. Looking at their colophons, most part of them can be considered common or regular too. For example, colophon of manuscript Penn Museum 83, 23, and 1, which reads as follows. We, Ta Chan, the husband, and Yai Pian, the wife, Nang Chai and Nai Kiao, the children, 4 of us, have faith in donating our money to produce this Pramalai manuscript for the religion. If we are born in any of next life, may there be no suffering for us in every life. May 4 of us be reborn as parents and children until we reach the enlightenment of the Arhat. So wishes for the next better lives, as well as the wish to be reborn in the same family, along with their beloved, resemble the colophons found elsewhere too. For example, that from Hamburg that I showed you in the previous slides. So another case can be seen on the front cover of the manuscript, MS Col 990, item 5, from the Penn libraries. Note that the colophons are sometimes written on the manuscript cover too. It is written here, this Pramalai manuscript was sponsored by us, Nairat and Mekong, for the religion. May this help us reach Nibbana Pachayo Hotu. Furthermore, colophon in poetry also appears at the end of manuscript Penn Museum 89, 13, 251, the one that will be the focus of my presentation. It is written in 8 stanzas of Gap Sabang meters. When we read the content of this colophon in verse, it tells readers to believe in the story of Pamalai and reminding them on committing good deeds. So the form is rather peculiar, but the content of this poem is rather common, okay? But now we finally turn to this peculiar colophon I showed you from the beginning of my presentation. This comes from the same manuscript of the previous slide. This colophon is inserted when one chanting text ends in the latter part of the manuscript, asking the readers to take a break and drink tea. For us modern readers, this might be seen as a joke. When I saw such a paracontent for the first time, I inevitably found that very peculiar, very hard to make sense of. However, if we compare this with the other cases in which the scribe asked the chanters and readers to take a break and drink, this might not be too peculiar in the Thai chanting tradition. So before we compare the case with the manuscripts elsewhere, please take a look at another manuscript from Philadelphia, namely Penn Museum 8323-1. Scribal notes written in Manuscript inserted within the main text or main contents also ask chanters to take a break when reaching some specific point of chanting text. Here it's written in Manuscript หยุดจบเสียก่อนผ่อนหายใจนอนเสียให้สบายเถิด so please take a break here exhale slowly and lay down to relax and on the page that follows there is also another scribal note written here so it reads please stop here before continuing หยุดลงที่นี้ก่อน for example So we did have a paracontent that tell the readers or users or chanters to take a break while chanting. Okay. Another manuscript from Penn Museum. This one is 7755. Contains scribal notes in the same way. This case reads นิมนต์หยุดเถิด or I invite you, venerable monks, to stop here. Note that the word นิมนต์ so นิมนต์ here, no? Literally to invite is used specifically when talking with or referring to monks, Buddhist monks. So the word belongs to the monastic register of Thai language. The use of these words suggests that the chanters in this case were monks. And apart from the manuscript from Philadelphia, we find the other manuscript elsewhere whose colophons or scribal notes ask their readers to take a break and sometimes drink tea. Here come from the National Library of Thailand. So here, it reads ข้าพเจ้าเขียนไว้เจ็บหลังสุดใจนิมนต์คุณฉันน้ำชา So I showed this example from in the previous slide. I wrote this manuscript. My back hurts very much. And I invite you, venerable monks, to drink tea. So the term for tea, น้ำชา or ฉันน้ำชา is still the same as our case study manuscript from Philadelphia. It can be noticed that the word nimon is also used here. Furthermore, a manuscript from the New York Public Library here also states the text of อภิธรรม7 คัมภีร์ ends here. or สำแดงจบ7 คัมภีร์หลวงพี่จ๋า so it's also addressed to venerable monks and at the end it said จงหยุดหย่อนผ่อนผันฉันน้ำชา please stop to relax and drink some tea and the words for eat or drink or in drink tea here they use the Thai word ฉันwhich is also the word specifically used with monks. Okay, so it's again monastic register of Thai language being used in the colophons. Correspondingly, a colophon from an อภิธรรม7 คัมภีร์ manuscript from New York Public Library also tells the chanters to take a break and drink some medicine or take some medicine. This manuscript, or Thai MS-20, is dated 1875. The scribal notes here mark the break within the chanting text twice. Both suggest the monk chanters to drink or take medicine as a part of the break. Like here, หยุดฉันเภสัชเสียทีหนึ่งก่อนเจ้าคุณขา Please take a break and have a medicine, my venerable. Or นิมนต์หลวงพี่หยุดฉันเภสัชอีกหนหนึ่งเป็นทุติยคำรบ2แล้ว So here is in the same manuscript but on the following pages. it can be translated as I invite venerable chanter monks to take a break and take medicine for another time, which is the second time. Okay, the other manuscript from New York to be mentioned here is Thai MS 11. So different from the previous one. This case is not only asking chanters to drink, but also to smoke cigar. So it's read here, take a break to smoke a cigar. Here, or หยุดสูบบุหรี่ฉันน้ำร้อนพอได้สั่งอุทธรณ์เถิดขวัญอ่อนเอ่ย so please take a break to smoke a cigar, drink hot water to comfort your stomach, my dear. So you see that the scribe asked chanter to take a break, to drink tea, and also to smoke. Okay. So obviously, these colophons telling chanters to take a break and drink tea are not as common as colophons of faith and witches, but they are not too uncommon either, as a few manuscripts, so in total I found 7 manuscripts, do ask their readers or chanters to take a break. Some of them even ask readers to drink tea, take medicine, or smoke cigar. If we consider that colophons often address chanters directly, this part from Manuscript Pen Museum 8913-251 is not the only case. But from these cases, we might assume that chanters were the main readers and users of the chanting books. Sometimes the scribes even expected their readers and chanters to be monks. So they address their readers with monastic register, as I explained earlier. These peculiar colophons also reflect the chanting practice in which chanters needed to take a break during the chant ritual. The scribal notes marking the break are sometimes placed after one Pali text is complete, or sometimes inserted within Pramalai text, which is relatively long. We cannot expect the entire text to be chanted without any pause, right? And apart from the colophons and scribal notes that tell readers to take a break and drink tea, we found the other cases of peculiar or less common paracontents from Thai chanting books in Philadelphia too, which of course deserve further scholarly attention. So I will talk about them briefly here. Normally, the Pramalai chanting books always contain the notes marking the names of chanting melodies written along with the main text of Pramalai Gonsua whenever the chanting melody and rhythm changes, so they mark the name of the chanting melodies. As I mark it here, is written here as Chert, okay? The common names of the rhythms are Chert, like written here, Rab, Gab, Chan. So appearing in hundreds of Pramalai manuscript, almost all of Pramalai manuscript, it contain these names of chanting melodies, but it appear only for the case of Pramalai Gonsua text, not any other Pali text. Okay. However, Pen Library MSCOLL 990 item 4 is marked with uncommon names of chanting melodies. So it does not only consist of the common ones like Chert, Rab, Gab, Chan, but more than a dozen of uncommon names for chanting melodies are found. For example, here is written Gwang Deun Dong, which literally means deer walking in the forest. Or here on the following page, Kating Long Tha, while ox down to the pier, a literal meaning, okay? And Mahachai, which means grand victory. So the location of the layout of these notes just being placed at the same place with the other name of chanting melody like Chertrap Kapsan. So we can interpret this strange name as the chanting melodies, but they are uncommon one. Okay. I myself never saw any chanting books with such various names of chanting melodies as in this manuscript from Philadelphia. If we collect all of these uncommon names from this manuscript, that would be many of the strange names. Okay? And this case is very, very uncommon, but definitely should be further researched by experts on Thai chants, actually. Okay, the final case of peculiar paracontents from Philadelphia, which I will mention here, is the use of chanting markers. So previous slide, we have the name of the chanting melodies, but this time it is the symbol which are inserted between the lines to indicate different melodies, pitches, and rhythms for Pali chanting text, as it can be seen from Manuscript Penn Museum 2016-21-3. Okay, and as you can see here with the marked with the red ink, so above the line and below the line of the main text. Found in some manuscripts of Pali chanting text and those of Mahashat Kamluang, the royal version of Vesantara Shatika written in Thai poetry. The latter text of Mahashat Kamluang has been chanted in ritual within the royal palace, and a small part of Mahashat Kamluang has still been chanted at present day, so in the rainy season in the royal palace. And the interlinear chanting markers have never been used with Pramalai text, but in the chanted Pali text such as Abhidhamma like this, or any other sutta in the chanting books. I've seen around 10 manuscripts of Abhidhamma or other Pali chanting books being marked with such symbols. However, Penn Museum 2016-21-3 is the only one with chanting markers ever found in Philadelphia. Okay, the chanting markers can be considered a lost tradition because modern chanters in the royal palace do not learn how to chant from these symbols anymore. Scholars from the late 19th century confirmed their function to specify pitches, melody, and rhythm of the chants. But now we cannot be sure what each symbol and graphic elements here exactly represents. The reconstruction of the meaning for each symbol of the chanting marker here is proposed by Professor Desha Sikongmeung from Naresuan University in Thailand in 2007. His work is, however, based on the remaining chanted part of Mahashat Kamluang, not the Pali chanting text such as Abhidhamma here. If we compare this one from Philadelphia with the other manuscripts with the chanting markers from the National Library of Thailand and from the Bavarian State Library in Munich, so here's from Thailand, here's from Munich, we can assume that they are all using the same system of chanting markers. You see the corresponding symbols being used. But the topic should be further investigated, of course. However, I mentioned this here as the other case of peculiar paracontents which can be found in Thai chanting books from Philadelphia. But still, it's not that too peculiar, because we also found the cases from other manuscripts too. So, as concluding remarks, we can see various form and contents from the paracontents of Thai chanting books concerning faith and witches, economic aspects, as well as chanting practices. They address chanters, mark the breaks, ask chanters to drink tea, as you saw from our previous slides. Apart from colophons and scribal notes, markers of the names for chanting melodies commonly featured the text of Pramalai, with an exception of uncommon chanting melodies singly found from Manuscript Collection 990, Item 4. Furthermore, chanting markers also feature the Pali chanting texts of some chanting books, including Penn Museum 2016-21-3. Among the various paracontents of Thai chanting books, some of them might be considered peculiar for modern readers. For example, complaints on back pain, swear words, encoded writing, or asking chanters to drink tea. One of them even records the blood donation for being mixed with the ink. Though I label them in the title as peculiar, I propose here that they are not too uncommon or too strange or peculiar, even though not that regular either. So last but not least, paracontents, namely colophons and scribal notes and so on, can be taken as a source for studying book history and history of reading. From them, we see sponsors and producers of manuscripts. We see readers and users of these chanting books, in this case, chanters, or laymen or monks. We also see the context of use in chanting and economic aspects of books from the expenses of production. And Thai chanting books are considerably a large genre of traditional manuscripts with artistic values due to colorful painting and beautiful handwriting. But they also contain historical values for book historians due to the aspects on book culture reflected from their paracontents, as shown here. And the example discussed today indicates that the two collections from Philadelphia offer striking cases of Thai chanting books with dynamic paracontents. Some of them should become a topic of serious research, such as the peculiar names of chanting melodies or the use of chanting markers. And that would be all for my presentation today. I thank you very much for your attention.
Peera, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. Very rich, some very startling finds, and these colophons just amazing in terms of the sort of social history that you're able to uncover, and I mean, it's just remarkable, like on many different fronts, from the role of women, which is very interesting, the kind of social status of the scribes, the context of these chanting books, and how they were used. And I guess we may have questions from the audience. I hope we do. But I might start by asking more of a sort of methodological question. So firstly, is there a corpus, or are you working on a kind of corpus of these colophons that, and if so, is it just yours for your personal research? Is there a thought to work towards a database or publication of these? I'm just thinking in the Western European context, there is a couple of sort of famous multi-volume works on colophons of scribes that, because what strikes me with your examples, correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, you have the similar problem in Latin colophons. It's hard to know what is formulaic, what the scribe is sort of just writing because it's a formula and they've seen it somewhere else, and what is sort of, let's say, like genuine to their expression in that particular instance. And so perhaps by aggregating these in some kind of database, and perhaps I'm very ignorant of Thai manuscript studies. Perhaps this already exists, but you could then at least start to determine what is a formula and what is original.
Yeah.
I just wonder if you had thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you very much, Nicholas. For the first question on the corpus, I'm sorry to say that we don't have any systematic corpus for manuscripts or catalog them, or for the colophons and on their contents. So I myself and my colleagues try to establish one of them, or maybe build up some of them. Actually, when I studied my PhD, I proposed my dissertation on the manuscript of Thai classical Thai poetry, And I published also the second volume, actually, originally my appendix, which is the hand list of manuscript that I used. And I also record the colophons that I used too. This is quite I don't know, a new attempt that scholar in my generation is trying to do. And regarding the formula, I have shown that there is a Pali formula that they always used, right? Nibbana Paccaya Hotu. But in many cases, we saw that the formula contain variation. Sometimes the scribe might not be very good at Pali, and they remember the formula and they write it down. Sometimes correct due to Pali grammar, sometimes not correct. For example, you see it's actually the formula has to end with Hotu because it's imperative, right? But in many cases you see hoti that is indicative, it's not imperative, for example. So they have some variations in that suggest that okay, it's just a formula. Okay, I hope I answered all of your questions.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So that right. Just fascinating. I mean, another. Well, we have a question from the chat actually. Maybe we should
Oh.
let's from Sarah Shaw, who says thank you. This was also helpful for background information. So much seems really important. Chanting contextual material and not peculiar at all. I've often wondered when translating Jatakas if the section breaks in the old Pali Jatakas were designed sensibly for refreshment breaks. It would be great if you ever felt inclined to compile an article seeing where the specific breaks are taken. Are they consistent? Thank you.
Okay, as far as and thank you very much for this wonderful question. I wonder it myself as well, and I saw that sometimes the break for refreshment does not appear consistently in due to the part of the text. For the shorter Pali chanting texts, for Abhidhamma 7 Kampi, right? They have the extracts of the 7 Abhidhamma text, and it's quite short. Sometimes the break occur during the end of this shorter Pali text, but it's not for every manuscript. But for the Thai longer text, it appeared to me that it's not consistent. but I have to check it again more carefully. The problem is that we have quite a limited number of the manuscript with this kind of paracontents of the break and so on. So we can compare some of them that we have, right? And if I have to answer it now, my feeling is that, and my opinion is that it's not consistent. But perhaps some, I don't know, 2 or 3 of them can have the break in the specific place, but I have to check.
Another question, one from Stephen Lang. Do you know whether and why the chanting marks fell out of use?
Oh, I can't quite tell. I'm trying to find a satisfying answer for that too. It's like that's the knowledge to interpret these kind of markers have been transmitted orally by one generation of monks to the later generations. And it seems that in the around the late 19th century, the people in the royal court or in the chief monasteries in Bangkok have already forgotten how to interpret this. So perhaps when the chanters already been trained, they memorize all the chanting melodies, rhythm, and pitches by heart already, so they don't have to rely on this kind of chanting markers anymore. Perhaps this is my guess or conjecture, actually. And it's like, so around the after the mid-19th century, the knowledge about that begins to fall out.
Wonderful. I was wondering, Peera, you mentioned at one point the sort of economics of creating these books and the how they became more expensive as printing became more widespread. And I mean that's a very interesting again with reference to the sort of Western context of the rise of printing. I mean, because right, that's not necessarily universal. I mean, it's more expensive to um, hire a scribe to create a single copy of something than it is to purchase a single copy of a printed book. But producing a printed edition requires capital that is greater than the cost of producing one manuscript. So, and then the other question I had sort of related to that is were there scribes? Were there a scribal class that was sort of out of work when printing became more widespread? And were there such chant books? I mean, printed. I mean, are there existing print copies that are interesting to look at, and do they have colophon? Sorry, that's several nested questions.
No worry, no worry. Okay, for the first question about the economic aspects. Okay, I think the printing press was introduced in Thailand or in Bangkok in 1837, quite early in comparing to the traditional manuscript that we have, right? And it's become more and more spreading. So first, it's limited itself to the printing of the missionary text, so the Christian teachings, and also some administrative announcements, royal announcement, and so on. And then they began their printing business and printing the literary texts and also the scientific text, traditional scientific text. And when the century of the decades passed, right, the printing spread wider and wider in the late 19th century, but traditional manuscript culture and manuscript production still continued until around mid 20th century. But it limits itself into some specific kind of manuscripts. For example, those being used in traditional monastic education still further copies. We have quite a number of them from the early 20th century. But for the case of Pramalai or chanting books, this is not only a books or the carrier of text, right? This is a donated object for monasteries. And this is also an artistic object too, because they hired the painters. Sometimes the scribe can be the painters, and sometimes they have to hire separately scribes and then the painters. And we found a different styles, different skills of the painters too. It's like the more skillful painters require more amount of money, for example. And when the printing press become more and more dominating in the late 19th century, the common scribes, private scribes, they lose their job for sure, right? But we have not many evidence about that, unfortunately. For the case of the royal scribes in the royal courts, so at the beginning of the 19th century, they were responsible for making copies of every kind of the text in the royal courts, right? But in the late 19th century, when printing press was already introduced for quite a while, they are limited themselves to make copy of some premium edition of the royal courts, some important texts and manuscripts, especially the manuscript that used in the ritual. They still keep working on that by hands. And also some diplomatic letters that used to honor the recipients. They still wrote it on the golden plates. So just like before. Okay, so So the scribal, royal scribes still worked within the royal courts, but their duty has changed. And some of the royal scribes have to learn to manage the printing press too. Some of them can be transferred to the department of the royal prints, royal printing press, and some of the official of the royal printing press then transfer back to the royal scribe department. So both departments were overlaps back then. Okay, I hope I answered all of your question.
And then are there colophons in printed books that may come from the scribal, that may be derived from manuscript copies or sort of
Some
vestigial kind of colophon?
some early printed books does keep colophon of the manuscript it based
Right.
on.
Okay. Right.
But it's not that common actually. Like the printing editor considered to keep mainly the text. Okay, and if they consult more than one manuscript, they will know what is the main text, what is a colophon that's specifically given to that manuscript or this manuscript, and they would consider removing it out from the printed edition. But one point to be mentioned here is that a Plummer-Lygon text has been printed very, very late. And it's like that, so not that late in the Second World War, but also around the First World War. So 1910s or something, quite late in comparing to any other literary texts, right? But it is not reprinted. It doesn't seem that the printed form is popular, but the manuscript form for this Pramali chanting text is still popular until middle 20th century. Yeah.
Thank you. And I see that Lynn Ransom has
Lynn.
had her hand up for a while. So Lynn, maybe you have a question.
Yeah, thank you, Peera. This is fascinating. I love how these colophons, they really enliven my sense of what the reading and the manuscript culture was like. I mean, it was really fascinating. But my question actually is about the books themselves, and I'm curious how and why so many of these beautiful works of art, as you say, left the monasteries in the first place. I know that they come to collections like Penn through, missionaries or colonial functionaries, but where are they and how are they acquiring these manuscripts? Is it theft? Is it looting? Is it that the manuscripts become, you get so many donated manuscripts that you have to make space? Like what are the conditions for the manuscripts leaving the monasteries?
Okay. Thank you very much, Lynn. This is also a large important topic for studying these beautiful chanting books, right? They sometimes we have a different stories from the late 19th century. Sometimes the monastery decided to sell it out to the antique dealers and so on. Okay, because keeping this kind of manuscript required a lot of effort and money, right? But most of them they are just stolen by some layman who has a connection in the monastery, or some of them worked for the monastery. Yeah, like a layman manager of the monastery and so on. And some of them are janitors, some of them just a layman who visited the monasteries quite often and gained access to every corner of the and sometimes they decided to take something away with them. So we can't quite tell into detail because there is no direct evidence on it.
Right.
But hearsay say that from all the monastery that I have experience in interviewing the monks and the managers in that. And sometimes, when the beautiful manuscript was kept in the monastery in in the late 20th century. And some governmental institution decided to publish it. Okay, just take a photo, publish, and leave the manuscript at the monastery. Not later, not long later than that, then the manuscript is gone. So,
Interesting.
it's just the robber or the antique dealer just saw the printed book, and then they know, okay, where they come from, and
Right.
they went to the monastery and then they take it out. So sometimes nowadays we are at the age of Facebook, right? Whenever we saw we see the photo of a very beautiful chanting books being posted on Facebook, they will not clarify the provenance or the source of the manuscripts just to protect the manuscripts. So in many cases, the monastery can sell it by themselves, or it can be stolen by.
Yes, of course.
And I have also heard that sometimes the monks or novices take part in that. So they know
Yeah.
where the manuscript is kept in the monastery, in which cabinet or in which residence of the monks. And then the antique dealer and also the robber come to take it away. So this is a sad story, but it is very hard for the monastery nowadays too, how they protect this valuable manuscript in the monastery, because monastery is a semi-public space, right? It's not a private one. It's not owned and organized by a single monk or a single group of monks, because monk disrobe and monk pass away, and there is a new monk being ordained here, or some monks from elsewhere just move to the monastery. And this is also the space for the laymen too. And I even heard the complaints by the monks in such an old monastery that they have the problem how to protect them, how to keep them in a good condition, I would say. But many of them that we have in the collection of National Library of Thailand, or the collection in the West, are mainly from antique dealers. I have also heard that in the big auction hall in Bangkok today, we found a lot of beautiful chanting books finding their ways to the auction hall too. So
Right. Lots of unscrupulous behavior. Is there any attempt to try to repatriate some of these books, or
not
is it just sort
really,
of
because not you mean the attempt to take the manuscript from the collections of the institution back to Thailand or so on?
yeah.
There are some attempts, but there's the problem is that if they successfully take that back, how they keep it, how they preserve it, right? Sometimes they would like to take it back and then donated it to the National Library of Thailand and so on. But sometimes it's not happen like that, because the monastery feel that they have ownership of these manuscripts and so on. So this is a tricky
a tough situation.
problem, because that there is also a scandalous loot happening in the southern Thailand not so long ago. So the last 10 years, the manuscript was donated from a famous monastery to an institution in the south, and then the institution the institute got plundered, and they tried so hard to take the manuscript back, and then some monastery decided to let the institute keep the manuscript. Some wanted it back, leading to the debate within the monastery, within the monks community, how would they keep this valuable manuscript not to get looted again. I think there will be a long debate.
Yeah.
And for this kind of manuscripts, it's very valuable, right? In the antique market, it costs a lot of money. I think they need a safe or a safe room for it to keep it in a secure place, but it would cost a lot of money too, right? So this is but this is interesting debate and interesting topics, but also complicated.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you too. Thank you too.
Great. And do we have any other questions for our speaker? It's close to 1:30 here in Philadelphia. So if we don't have any further questions,